Today we're coming to you from Popoyo, Nicaragua. This is one of my favorite places to surf. It's been pretty much a constant in my life for about the last almost 2 decades. I've been spending months here a year. I've seen it change, I've seen it grow, I've seen it expand. It's gone from a hardcore surfer's paradise to like an everyday accessible surfer's paradise. It's called Popoyo. It's named after Finca Popoyo, which is where one of the most famous waves here is located, but in reality, none of the towns here are actually called Popoyo. Camps here, Nico Waves, Popoyo Surf Lodge. This was the first area that was really pioneered in the Tola region. You can score here pretty much every day of the year. Popoyo is like the most consistent break, maybe even in all of Central America. In the Popoyo area, there's also several other breaks. There's a couple other points, both on the inside of Popoyo and on the other side of Popoyo towards Guascate. I'm going to let you find those for yourself. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of spots around Popoyo. It's super consistent. And if you walk in from Guascate or Chicolete, you won't have to pay to park. So let's talk about the subtle and sometimes not so subtle nuances of surf seasons in Nicaragua. A lot of people think because of what they see online that Nicaragua is perfect all the time. But in the reality, it has a few very distinct seasons, and it has a couple of what we call shoulder seasons, okay? So first you've got the wet season, which runs from like May, June until the end of October. Okay, then you're gonna have the dry season, which is gonna run from November until May or June, depending on when the rains start. Okay, so in general, the waves are much bigger during the wet season because Nicaragua gets exposed to south and southwest swell. The swells are bigger because that's southern hemisphere winter, and so there are bigger storms that come off of the roaring 40s, you know, in between New Zealand and Australia and Chile and Peru, and they send pumping swell this way. Okay, in the dry season, the waves are generally smaller. Okay, in the wet season also, the winds are generally just a little bit lighter. In the dry season, the winds here can get up to 50 kilometers per hour straight offshore, which means a lot of times in January and February, you're going to be needing some sort of rubber. Like some days it even drops into the 60s and you might even need a 3-2. A lot of people have booked a surf trip to Nicaragua in winter, northern hemisphere winter, in dry season, January, February, even March, and got here to find that it's freezing and tiny for months at a time. In our fall from the northern hemisphere in November and early December, you're gonna find mostly clean, mostly manageable, pretty good waves actually. They don't get too big because the south swells, you can still get a big south swell, but the south swells don't necessarily pump during that time of year, and so that's a great time for like an intermediate to come to Nicaragua. Now in late August and September and October, that's a time that's generally not as consistent here because you're going to find a lot more days with onshore winds. That's the only time of year where you really get to see consistent onshore winds that happen regularly here. because of the wet season, because of hurricanes. If a hurricane enters the Caribbean side of Central America and passes up towards the Yucatan, it's going to disrupt the wind flow across Lake Nicaragua, and that means it's going to go on shore. If you enjoyed this guide, please drop a comment on us. So now let's talk about the other shoulder season, the Northern Hemisphere spring, which is, March, late March, April, May, and sometimes into June, even though usually by June the big south swells have started to come with a little more consistency. But the shoulder season, that time of year, it can be hit or miss. It can be really good. It can still have cold days. There are lots of jellyfish, so you might want to bring, some kind of jellyfish repellent and antihistamine, because you're going to get hit by sea lice. You're going to get hit with what we call agua mala. Agua mala is like the big jellyfish here that will wrap around you and sting the crap out of you. That being said, a lot of the breaks here that time of year are really uncrowded, because you're coming out of the winter season. Most of the hardcore surfers haven't arrived yet, and you can score here, uncrowded waves. The downside of that season is because it hasn't rained in a while, because the winds have been blowing, some of the sandbars are going to be depleted, which means a lot of the beach breaks are just not going to be quality. They can still be quality depending on what you're expecting, but the highest quality of the beach breaks here comes when the sandbars have been replenished by a little bit of rain, or even a lot of bit of rain, depending on the spot. Over by Rancho Santana, the barrel pretty much every day. It works better with a little less period, but it can still work at 15, 16, 17 seconds if the swell's from the right direction and the wind is from the right direction, and you catch the right tide. Chicolete and Santana Arrow works better mid to high tide, but that being said, sometimes when the rivers have been running, you can find some sandbars out there even at low. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little surf guide of the Popoyo area. I highly recommend checking it out. They're building a new highway through the area that's going in right now. It's only going to become more accessible over the next few years. I hope everybody's liking the content on this channel. Like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Shredder out.